Campus2Canton. Campus2Canton on the Better Sports Network.
Last week, a little bit sleepy, gentlemen, in college football. This week, we're dialing it all the way up. I've lost track of how many ranked matches that are going to have reverberations throughout college football. But week 4 is where you want to be in front of your television watching college football. We do not take for granted that you are watching us today. We're probably the only show that comes from a player-centric perspective. Legacy Media, those other shows, they're all about the program and coaches. Here on the Tailgate on the Better Sports Network, we focus on your college fantasy lineups, player props, placing your tickets. That's what we're going to do today. Nicholas Ian Allen, JJ, Chris Moxley, all here with me, and I'm Felix Sharp. We're here with you until 12 o'clock today. We're going to help you set those lineups, and I want to get to that. Let's start off right off the bat, if we can get to our quarterbacks today, that we're seeing lots of great matchups. Caleb Williams going to Arizona State. Jaden DeLaura has been firing it up. Bo Nix taking on the hot Colorado Buffaloes today. It's going to be a great day. DeQuan Finn, a little bit of action, taking on my Western Michigan University Broncos. Is that game in Kalamazoo or is it in Toledo? Anybody know? It's in Kalamazoo. I know. I know that stadium well. Dylan Gabriel, Oklahoma, taking on Cincinnati today, the new Big 12. Michael Pratt back from injury. Michael Penix Jr. coming off a really hot game last week in East Lansing, really tearing up Michigan State, especially in that first half. Washington gets Cal today. Jordan Travis in one of the bigger games on the slate. Florida State at Clemson. Clemson favored in that game. Grant Wilson, a name that we have not seen a bunch there at Old Dominion. And let's see, Tyler Van Dyke, the U is back. Miami taking on Temple. Jaden Daniels, LSU, gets Arkansas today. I could start any of the quarterbacks in that game, to be honest. I still like as his name, forgetting me. Jefferson. What's the quarterback at Arkansas's name? I don't know why I do that.
KJ Jefferson.
Yes, KJ Jefferson, the big quarterback, can get you a rushing touchdown today, or a couple of rushing touchdowns today. That is our quarterback lineup. Nick, any particular matchups that you are intrigued by, quarterbacks that you're intrigued by today that you want to start?
Well, as often is the case, I go through, look at the C2C rankings, see how they compare to my projections. And I'm a little bit lower on Joe Milton this week, which hurts me. You probably won't find a bigger fan of Joe Milton than me, but it's been off to a little bit of a slow start this season, but a lot of the other ones line up pretty well this week. I mean, it's hard to look at the top and expect anything different, obviously, than Caleb Williams. We're seeing so much great quarterback play out of the Pac-12. Michael Penix and Cam Ward off to great starts as well. So lots of great options, lots of great matchups for sure.
Chris Moxley, I got this question yesterday on Twitter regarding which quarterback to start, and these were the names that I had to choose from. Quinn Ewers, Tyler Show, Shedeur Sanders, Drew Aller, Tyler Van Dyke, and Spencer Rattler. I don't think it's Ewers. I don't think it's Sanders on the road at Oregon or Ewers playing Baylor today. I picked Tyler Van Dyke, and then working through it, it might be, going back to it, it's either Tyler Shuck or Shedeur Sanders on the road, given the volume that he's going to get passing. How would you shake out those names, Chris? Again, Quinn Ewers, Tyler Show, Shedeur Sanders, Drew Aller, Tyler Van Dyke, Spencer Rattler. Did I do the right thing in saying, hey, go ahead and line up start Tyler Van Dyke today?
I don't know. And he gets Temple today, right? But Temple. There's a storm on the East Coast, man, and I'm getting it right now. And it's going to hit Philadelphia later, and I think it's going to affect some of the deep passing we see out of the Miami offense. I could see short passing. I'm not like super excited. I think Tyler Van Dyke might be the best option out of that group, so I don't want to like say that that was the wrong thing, but I would temper expectations for Tyler Van Dyke today because like we could have 20 plus mile per hour. Anything over 15 is potentially problematic. So just keep that in mind when you're setting your lineups, that there are big time weather impacts. And we'll talk about some of those, but that's a concern to have with Van Dyke. I would probably still start Shador just based on volume alone.
Right.
All they do is pass. They can't run the ball. He's probably going to throw for like 250 and 2 at minimum. So, yeah, I think you probably answered the right throw. And I'm not trusting this South Carolina passing offense with Spencer Rattler without Juice Wells, who is missing and potentially out for a couple more weeks. I mean, they really only have Xavier Legette and a couple tight ends. So that's a pretty tough pick, but I think you led them the right way.
Xavier Legette having a really good 5th or 6th season. He might be a Senior Bowl candidate at the end of this at the end of this year. The way he's playing, our intern JJ, any particular quarterbacks that you like in this loaded Week 4 matchup that's going to be exciting from a real college football perspective and from a fantasy perspective?
I like Jalen Milroe. That's my dude. I think he's finally back in the driver's seat, and I don't know. Hopefully, Tommy Reese lets him cook for real. Someone in the comments said Jalen Milroe too. I'm with him.
Jalen Milroe getting that starting position back after losing it to Tyler Buckner for 1 week and Ty Simpson. I don't know what they're doing there at Alabama. I don't know that Jalen Milroe necessarily should have been sat last week, but hey, regardless, Frunky's mentions in the chat. Thomas Castellanos plays at 3:30 at Louisville today. Listen, this was one of my best shoot from deep calls ever. I mean, I saw this dude play at Ware County in Georgia with his teammate Cartavius Norton, who's now the starting running back at Iowa State. He has some Russell Wilson. He has some Johnny Manziel in his game, and you saw that last week against Florida State. Nearly pulled off the upset. This guy is a work in progress as a passer, but as a rusher, he might have the title today as the best rusher in the country. Thomas Castellanos, a redshirt freshman, who his previous school literally laughed at me when I asked for an interview with that kid last year. But that's neither here nor there. All right, I want to bring up the running back position here. Let's take a look at the running back. We really want to help people get their starting lineups here set today. Devin Neal right at the top, taking on BYU. I traded away Devin Neal to get Devin Brown in a trade earlier this year. Devin Neal playing really, really well. He might be playing himself into some serious draft capital. Marcus Carroll, Georgia State, taking on Coastal Carolina. Blake Corum is back from his injury, and Michigan has Rutgers today. I know that some people are on Rutgers. I think that line is 21 or so. Blake Corum taking on Rutgers today. Jawar Jordan, we just talked about that Louisville versus Boston College game at 3:30 today. Trevor Etienne, Florida gets Charlotte. Roman Hemby, Maryland gets Michigan State. Marshawn Lloyd. Maybe we have faith in the starting running back at USC now. Marshawn Lloyd, USC is taking on Arizona State. Ray Davis. We always like Kentucky running backs. Kentucky gets Vanderbilt, whether it be Benny Snell 2 years ago or last year. We always like that Kentucky running back. Michael Wiley at Arizona, that high-flying spread offense. We still like Michael Wiley. They get Stanford today. Jordan Waters and Duke get Connecticut. Jordan James has really established himself in a timeshare there at Oregon. Oregon, of course, one of the bigger games of today. Oregon gets Colorado. LeQuint Allen. Syracuse gets Army. Omarion Hampton, North Carolina takes on Pittsburgh. And then TreVeyon Henderson. TreVeyon Henderson is got the big game at Notre Dame today. Chris, this Ohio State Notre Dame game, I mean, TreVeyon Henderson has been kind of up and down on the season. We've kind of seen him run through some big gaping holes. If I'm Ryan Day and I've been called soft, for the last 2 years, I might be deploying Trip Trainium. I might be deploying Mayan Williams in this game, where you're going to face a very balanced Notre Dame offense. I might try to limit the number of possessions in this game, and I might not play TreVeyon Henderson as much, the speed back. I might opt for the 220-pound guys in Trainium and Mayan Williams. What do you think about sitting TreVeyon Henderson today?
I don't think this Notre Dame defensive line is super great. I think that there's some questions there. So I don't really want to. I think there are better options than Trevion. I'm not as high as our rankings are on him. So yeah, I wouldn't mind. A guy that's not in the top 14 that I would certainly play over him is Rasheen Ali, the Marshall running back. That game has a really low total. Probably some ancillary weather impacts, but I mean, Marshall gets Virginia Tech, and Virginia Tech is, if they're not on quit watch, they probably are after this week. That team is real bad. They got crushed by Rutgers too. I mean, anytime you're crushed by Rutgers, it's bad time.
Well, we're having a good time here. You can let us know who you're starting and sitting in the chat, either at Campus2Canton on YouTube or Better Sports on YouTube. Go ahead and like the video, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Nick, I want to come to you on this Ohio State-Notre Dame matchup. I think that I would be scared to not only start Travion Henderson, but to be honest with you, I might be a little bit scared to start Marvin Harrison Jr. today, because I think that this game lends itself to being a defensive matchup. What do your numbers say about this game? Give us some context for this game today.
Well, so this obviously is such a huge matchup, and I'm sure we're going to be talking plenty about it. My numbers specifically are as high as they get on Ohio State, basically. So do have Ohio State favored in the game. My total projections are not far off of what the odds makers have it, being a 28-27, 28-26 type game. I wouldn't necessarily be scared to start Marvin Harrison or even, Emeka Egbuka. I think that though Notre Dame is certainly, a talented team, is playing really, really well, is going to be the toughest test that Ohio State has faced defensively so far this season. Notre Dame is not elite defensively. Ohio State has a talent edge. Their offense versus the Ohio State's offense versus the Notre Dame defense. They've got they're like 12th in my defensive roster strength ratings, and they're playing slightly outside of the top 25 defensively in my team performance numbers. So they do so far grade out a little bit better against the pass than the run. But I think that, Harrison and Egbuka in that passing game, they've got a talent advantage at just about every position. So I'm not overly concerned that Notre Dame is going to shut down this offense. I think if you've got an opportunity to play a Harrison, you pretty much have to do it. He's good enough to take over the game regardless of the opponent, and that includes Notre Dame, in my opinion.
If you sit Marvin Harrison and he goes off on your bench, like I cannot imagine that feel. That's like, don't get out of bed on Sunday till like 3 p.m. kind of feeling.
Really big prove-it spot for Kyle McCord in this Ohio State offense. I think that there's been questions about this team offensively after the Indiana game, even though they've had two lesser opponents and have put up big numbers against them. They have a real test today against Notre Dame. JJ, when we look at this running back slate for the week, is there any particular player that you are gravitating towards or watching for today?
I'm watching for Jace McClellan. I'll talk about it a little bit more later, but I think Jace McClellan last week, Wardell kind of outsnapped him and outtouched him as well. So I want to watch what he's going to do this week and see where Saban has him at, really.
All right, there we go. That Alabama game. Let's see how they fare against another good matchup, Ole Miss. Can Lane Kiffin get that win against Alabama? A lot of people think that Lane Kiffin could be the next head coach at Alabama. I want to bring up the wide receivers now as we help people get their lineup set here in week 4 in the college fantasy slate. Fresno State always has one of these guys. Last year it was Nico Remigio. This year it's Eric Brooks, who's getting a lot of volume there at Fresno State. I've seen Eric Brooks on waiver wires in a lot of places. You might be able to still pick him up. Of course, Roma Dunze, the outside wide receiver there for Washington, taking on California. Malik Neighbors went nuclear last week, catching all of his targets for over 200 yards. LSU gets Arkansas today. Is it Jaquan? Jaquan Jackson. Tulane gets Nichols today. Jalen McMillan, the slot wide receiver for Washington there, takes on California. Tetaroa McMillan might be a Drake London type archetype at wide receiver. Arizona gets Stanford. Gage Larvadan, my Miami of Ohio Redhawks, coached by Coach Chuck Martin, taking on Delaware State today. Lawrence Keys, again, Tulane gets Nichols. Brian Thomas Jr., who has emerged a little bit in this LSU offense. LSU gets Arkansas. Troy Franklin has been, again, playing well. Oregon and Colorado, one of the bigger matchups of today. Nick Anderson, the freshman there at Oklahoma, takes on Cincinnati. Xavier Weaver with no Travis Hunter. Could he have a bigger role today against Oregon on the road? Drake Stoops. We've got to see a lot of Oklahoma wide receivers. Drake Stoops, Oklahoma against Cincinnati. And then Jamari Thrash has been excellent on the season, just as we expected. Jamari Thrash been excellent on the season. They get Boston College again today. Mox, any wide receivers again here on this slate that you're like, lock in, start them, don't think about it, let's go, they're going to score?
Someone like Jalen Polk, I think you can feel really confident about starting, even though he's the third wide receiver on Washington. I mean, Roma Dunze and Jalen McMillan are awesome, but Jalen Polk is a player too. And so I think you can feel really good about rolling him. He's been excellent to start the year too. So not that you're having questions, but he's a player who I think you can basically lock in for a wide receiver 2 finish every week and feel good about it. I mean, Washington gets Cal. Not particularly worried about Cal. I thought they should have lost to Auburn. They let Idaho get ahead 17-0 on them last week. They eventually came back, but yeah, I'm not particularly worried about this Cal defense. So I'm starting pretty much all my receiving options on this Washington team, including the third wide receiver. No problem with that.
Jalen Polk, the third wide receiver at Washington, but you look at his size, he's like 6'2", 200 and something pounds, something like that. He has good speed. This is a guy who's might get NFL draft capital. And if you're playing in our format, Campus to Canton, we have to get some of these guys who are going to transition to the NFL. Jalen Polk, even being the third wide receiver there at Washington, he has a chance to be an NFL player. JJ, let me come to you. Any particular wide receivers on the list that you are watching for today that you're starting? By the way, I should mention, Campus2Canton.com, you can get projections. I mean, we're listing the top 14 here, but if you want through wide receiver 50 or quarterback 50, you can get that information, those projections at Campus2Canton.com. JJ, who do you got on the week at wide receiver?
Whenever I see any league I'm in and I see Malik Neighbors, I'm starting him. That's just how it works. I'm a big Malik Neighbors guy, and I want to trademark the term "love thy neighbors." I don't know how he hasn't thought of that, but I've been tweeting it, and I need to trademark it before he gets onto it.
Chris Moxley, I don't know if Chris Moxley's opinion has changed on Malik Neighbors, but we're going to have to revisit that viral TikTok, where Chris Moxley was getting just flamed by the LSU faithful there. Nicholas, Ian Allen, any particular wide receivers that you are gravitating towards here in week 4, whether it's the top 14 or even outside of the top 14 on the slate?
Well, one note on the Washington discussion that I think is worth remembering: Jalen McMillan left last week's game with an injury. Sounds like he's going to be back, and all reports are that he's good to go. But if he's less than 100%, perhaps he doesn't get his full workload, so that could potentially put Roma Dunze and Jalen Polk in an even better situation. But yeah, my numbers are not too far out of line with what we've got here. I think your point is great about Xavier Weaver set up for a big day, especially without Travis Hunter. That should impact Jimmy Horn Jr. as well. And I'm a little lower on Eric Brooks. I think my numbers have him outside of the top 10, but part of that is because I do like Jalen Gill, the transfer from Originally Ohio State, most recently Boston College.
Boston College, right?
Yeah, he's kind of, I think, emerging as kind of in that Jalen Cropper Marino mold, where they try to get creative with the ways that they get him the football. And though Brooks is off to an excellent start and certainly worth a start, I think that there's a chance that Gill starts to creep up a little bit more closer to his ceiling, if that makes sense.
I did not mention this name when we talked about the running backs, but Fresno State has a walk-on who is absolutely balling for them. Is one of the better running backs in G5. Elijah Gillum is a 5'11", 212-pound running back who, again, has been carrying the load for Fresno State. He did leave last week's game with an injury, but I believe he came back towards the end of the fourth quarter. Scholarship, Gilliam. Get him a scholarship. I think he's sixth in G5 in rushing yards, something like that. Having an excellent season from Bishop Gorman in Nevada. So he played big time. Bishop Gorman, one of the better high school programs in the country. He's been playing excellent high school football, big time high school football now there at Fresno State. Get him a scholarship, coach. Get him a scholarship. Let's bring up the tight ends here, and I'm going to bring up the tight ends here on the website. That's where I'm looking at all of our starters. The projections could potentially change, so it might be a little bit different than what we have on the screen. If you want to get the most recent projections that we have and the rankings that we have for week 4, you can go to Campus2Canton.com and get all of them there. Jack Westover, Washington takes on Cal. Again, we're just looking at that Cal offense. Michael Penix Jr. directing traffic to all of these pass catching weapons. JT Sanders there at Texas. Texas gets Baylor. Dallin Holker, excellent game last week against Colorado, so much so that Jim Nagy even pointed out Dallin Holker's play, and so his name is starting to reverberate. But Chris Moxley, I think that you're the first person that I heard talk about Dallin Holker in the offseason, if I'm remembering correctly. But I believe that you pointed him out to me, a couple of months ago. Amari Niblack there at Alabama seems to be taking over the tight end role. Cade Stover, Ohio State. Tanner Koisel, Ball State gets Georgia Southern. Thomas Fedone. Is Thomas Fedone healthy? I don't remember if Thomas Fedone is healthy or if he's back. That escaped me. Thomas Fedone, a number 1 tight end 3 classes ago. Nebraska gets Louisiana Tech. 2 ACL tears, just like my boy at Notre Dame, who's had 2 ACL tears in the same knee. Jaheim Bell, Florida State. Jaheim Bell can also play running back and can do the jet sweep stuff. Florida State gets Clemson in one of the bigger matchups on the day. Ben Sinnott, Kansas State gets UCF. Holton Stays has kind of emerged as that replacement for Michael Mayer at Notre Dame. Notre Dame again gets Ohio State today. Benjamin Urasek. We saw that big week 1 performance against Hawaii. Stanford gets Arizona today. Brock Bowers. We're always starting Brock Bowers. Georgia gets USB. Corey Dyches, who has been receiving, you could see this in the spring game. He's going to get wide receiver usage, but he gets a tight end designation. We like those players. Corey Dyches. Dalvin Smith at Western Kentucky. There are some of these players who get wide receiver usage but get a tight end designation. That is Corey Dyches, so we're starting him. Maryland gets Michigan State today. And then Isaac Rex we saw have a big season in 2020 during the pandemic with Zach Wilson at the helm. He's still there at BYU. Chris Moxley, you're my tight end expert, so let me throw it to you. Is there any tight ends that you like on this week in particular?
Yeah, guy outside the top 14, someone that I've talked about a bunch that is I have probably rostered everywhere. So if you're in a league with me, I'm starting him. Harold Fannin, Bowling Green tight end. One of my favorite players in the country. I just think he's athletic, and they use him on rushing. He had 4 rushing touchdowns as a true freshman as a tight end. Like, they use him all over the field. They get Ohio. Ohio's defense is playing a lot better this year than they were last year, like significantly better, which held them back last year in a lot of games. But I think they could do a little bit of damage. He's a focal point of that offense, and I'm not super worried about the coverage from the linebackers or safeties in this game. I think the strength is at the corners and the more on-ball linebackers. So I'm okay rolling him out. He's not in our top 14, but I do think that, you can feel pretty good about starting him today.
Is that
He also
Harold
went for
Fannin?
Harold Fannin, 7-109 and 1 2 weeks ago. And then they got Michigan last week. So obviously you weren't starting him against Michigan.
Find a show anywhere else on CBS, ESPN, ABC. Find a 3-letter network show that mentions Harold Fannin's name today, and I'll give you a free year at Campus2Canton.com. That's how we go in. Nicholas Ian Allen, any particular tight ends that you're gravitating towards here in week 4, whether or not they're in our top 14 or even thereafter?
Well, one that, the matchup isn't perfect, but is going to get a much heavier workload moving forward. Eric All at Iowa, with Luke Lachey going down with a significant injury. He's going to miss, if not the entire season, a good chunk of it. All, I think, is in line for a really heavy workload moving forward. Of course, Iowa today plays Penn State on the road, so tougher matchup. But he comes out pretty high in my rankings this week in the top 5 for sure. And then one note, another injury follow up. Ohio State's in a Arizona State's in a really, really bad spot with injuries, but they did get a little bit of good news earlier this week that Jalen Conyers is back and practicing after missing last week. USC, obviously, they're a heavy underdog against the Trojans this week. But if Conyers is close to 100%, I would expect that he's going to get plenty of work this week. So another injury-related option there.
I want to point out Colston Loveland, the tight end there at Michigan. Only 9 receptions on the season. I'm still waiting for the breakout game from Colston Loveland. It seems like Roman Wilson has been the big play guy. We saw last year, even sharing the field with Eric All before he transferred to Iowa. Colston Loveland really performed well. Again, as a true freshman, he's a converted wide receiver. Waiting for that breakout game. Maybe it's this week against Rutgers for Michigan. JJ, any tight end here that you care about? I know that we think tight end is a throwaway position, but sometimes we can find some sneaky value somewhere, especially kind of these guys who are hybrid type players. Any particular tight ends that you're looking forward to this week?
Yeah, tight end's not really my thing. I can't lie. I think in every single draft I just punt, and then I think I have a couple of Fannin shares too, and starting him in most leagues. And then I got Drake Dabney from Baylor. He went off week 1, hasn't done anything since, and I'm hoping this game against Texas he can replicate week 1.
All right, there we go. You can get, again, from position from either ranking 1 through 50, whatever you need. Go to Campus2Canton.com and you can get all of our full projections there. When we come back, we're going to go to break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about the storylines that we're looking for here in week 4. Again, it is a loaded slate. You're going to want to stay with us right up until 12 o'clock. This is the Tailgate on the Better Sports Network. There we go.
I like to eat my feelings. So when I'm like super sad, single serving pint sizes of Ben & Jerry's, I just start shoveling that in, and it makes me feel bigger and better. But so let's eat our feelings here. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk football players, food. We're going to pair them up. Who is represented by what food? All right. I want to just shout out Hal Alexander in there for CMC. Christian McCaffrey is Rocky Road ice cream. A little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Does
it? Good one, Hal.
I like it, man. You know it. I love me some Rocky Road ice cream. Bijan Robinson prime rib. You know what? Bijan Robinson prime rib with a baked potato and some cream spinach on the side. That's what I'm talking about. That is the King's dinner. And Bijan Robinson, I don't care if the dude from The Athletic says only 301, touches. You know what? In honor of Card Sharks, I'm going to say, guys, that I think that number is going to be a little bit higher there for Bijan Robinson. So get your knife, get your fork, you got your steak, you got your Bijan.
Yeah, that's what's up. You're on death row, and they say you get one last meal, and you just say Bijan Robinson.
Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, I'm totally down with that. Love it.
I got to jump in on one real quick because Mr. Scamper said Kareem Hunt is candy corn, and I actually had a player, Tyler Boyd, was going to be candy corn for me, and basically it's that nobody likes it, but it's always there. It's always there, and somebody always puts their hand in and grabs some and has some, and they're like, well, and afterwards they're like, why did I eat that? That's Tyler Boyd. He always gets drafted, and he's just kind of there, and nobody knows why. Nobody knows why they take him. Nobody knows where it comes from. Where does the candy corn even come from? Like, it's just there. It's just there.
All right, and we're back. The tailgate right here on the Better Sports Network. Chris Moxley, JJ, we got to get your Twitter up there on your name tag so people can follow you on Twitter and Nicholas Ian Allen. You can get all of your projections, returning production, everything that you need at Campus2Canton.com. The C2C Winning Edge package, courtesy of Mr. Nicholas Ian Allen. I did not put this on the show sheet, but Chris Moxley, gun to your head, you only get to watch one game today. You only get to watch one. Which game are you picking?
Ohio State, Notre Dame.
JJ?
I love it.
Go ahead, Chris.
No, I was just gonna say I think best NFL talent, closest game, great storylines. No other reason.
JJ, you only get to pick one game today. Which one are you watching?
I'm going to be at the Baylor game versus Texas at 7, but I can guarantee you I'm going to have the Ohio State Notre Dame game on my phone watching it.
Nick, are you staying with these two, or are you picking another one?
Well, I assume I can compare notes with these guys later, so I'll let them watch that one. And, I think I'll be watching most closely Ole Miss at Alabama. That is a kind of a funky projection in my numbers. I feel like we're maybe a little bit too high on Ole Miss and oddly maybe a little too low on Alabama. So I want to see how what my eyes tell me compares with right now how the numbers shake out on that one.
I'm going to pick UCLA in Utah. 3:30 p.m. UCLA going into Utah. It looks like Cam Rising is going to be back, but that's not the reason I'm watching. I'm watching. He's not going to be back. Cam Rising not going to be back.
Oh, he's not.
No, it's going to make it an even better game. Dante Moore was not only the best freshman in the class coming out of Detroit King in Michigan, but there's a chance that he might be one of the better quarterbacks in college football. He gets a big road test against Utah today. I want to see this dynamic freshman player, Dante Moore, against a very good Utah team. The Pac-12, they're having an excellent last season. Very good play throughout the Pac-12, and I really like this UCLA and Utah game. So that would be the one that I would be watching because I can compare notes with Chris and JJ on Ohio State and Notre Dame. Speaking of Ohio State and Notre Dame, let's get into some Week 4 storylines here that we're looking forward to. And there are numerous. I mean, again, this is a loaded slate. I have to, when I'm looking at storylines, I have to stick with that Ohio State and Notre Dame game. And I'm looking specifically at Kyle McCord. He has taken some heat, despite the team being 3-0, despite the fact that he's completing about 70% of his passes, the fact that there was a quarterback battle to start the season, the fact that, a lot of people have Devin Brown as a very talented player in his own right. It's Ryan Day announced starting quarterback twice, once before the season and then once after the Western Kentucky after the Western Kentucky game, again announced Kyle McCord as the starter. It still feels like that he is not solidified as the starter, and it feels like Devin Brown could have a chance. They get the biggest test that they've had all season going into Notre Dame. How does he perform? How does he handle the pressure? That's something that I'm looking forward to. Again, like we know that these skill positions, there's a lot of talent there. I don't know how confident we are in the quarterback. So that's something I'm looking forward to. Chris, I mean, what is your take on how you expect McCord to perform going in here in week 4, going into touchdown Jesus, Notre Dame. I mean, the crowd's going to be rocking. It's going to be a pressure-packed environment. I know Ohio State has the talent edge, but that's not the end-all, be-all. I mean, I think that Ohio State could get upset here, and I think a lot of it is going to depend on how Kyle McCord plays today.
I need to see Kyle McCord play well here because I don't have a lot of confidence in Kyle McCord. I thought that they did some really good things last week. That was also Western Kentucky, who great offense, not so great defense. Conference USA, not really a close game. This is going to be a close game. They're on the road. It's not going to feel like a road game. It's probably going to be 50-50 Ohio State fans in South Bend. So it's not going to be a hostile environment, but I think it's still a really big test for Kyle McCord. Dude, all you got to do is hit open receivers in Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka. That's it. You got 2 best receivers in the country on your team. So all you got to do is not that complicated. I mean, I could not play quarterback for Ohio State, but a lot of quarterbacks sit there, take what you get, hit the 2 best receivers, and you're set. That's it. Don't got to be some like Thomas Castellanos type player making everything happen. Stay in the pocket, make good decisions. That's it. That's all I need from Kyle McCord.
Nick, I know you talked about the numbers here earlier, and you have Ohio State, as the number 1 team. Talk to me about the numbers, but talk to me just as a human being. Do you have faith in Kyle McCord? Are you pushing the chips in and saying, he's going to have the performance today. He's going to get the W here for Ohio State. And this team is going to get some respect after this week, some respect that they have not had really this entire season.
So I definitely do trust the numbers, put a lot of time, a lot of effort into it. And so for the most part, I'll kind of default to that. I think that the numbers are definitely smarter than me. I trust them more than my own opinion. But yeah, I think that, kind of like what Mox said, Kyle McCord doesn't have to win the game himself, right? He can lean on what, again, my numbers say is the most talented roster in the country right now. They're ranked number 1 in roster strength, number 3 on the offensive side of the ball, number 1 on defense, which I think is something that maybe is a bigger deal than we often talk about. But it will be a tough matchup. It is definitely a step up in competition from what we've seen from Ohio State, but I do think that we have seen some improvement from Ohio State offensively in each of its first 3 games. Last week looked really quite good against Western Kentucky. It seems like things are setting themselves up to really start to roll a bit. And I think, Kyle McCord is got a little bit of a longer leash now, and it seems like he's going to be able to distribute the football to that, uber talented supporting cast, and I think they're going to be fine. I think they're going to go in and get the win, and McCord, as long as he doesn't do anything to lose the game, won't have to go out there and win it himself.
JJ, give us your take on whether or not Kyle McCord is going to be able to distribute to these excellent receiving weapons here on a really tough road matchup.
To me, I think Kyle McCord is just a guy. Like, I'm just not a fan of him. My friend's a big Ohio State fan, and he's not a fan of him. All he can talk about is Aaron Nolan coming in next year. So I'm not too high on him, but I do trust Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka and even Carnell Tate. So for me, I have Ohio State this week, and I have the spread. So I guess I have enough faith in Marvin Harrison in the receiving core to get it done, but I'm not sold on Kyle McCord at all.
All right, Chris Moxley. I mean, there's any number of ways that you could go. Give me a week 4 storyline that you're tracking so our audience here can track along with you. And you're muted. You're muted, Mox.
Yes, of course I am. Is it too obvious to say Alabama bounce back? I mean, that's really what I'm I'm interested in. Do the Tide look better than they did against USF, where they only scored 13 points? I was going to say on the road. Yeah, it was on the road, but like Alabama should score more than 13 points, regardless of where if that game was played on Mars, they should score more than 13 points. I'm kind of the opinion that that's going to look like an anomaly long term. There are whispers that it was not entirely performance based that Jalen Milroe sat last week and didn't play at all. So I'm pretty interested to see how he responds as well. Now that it was like a disciplinary issue, I don't want to imply that, but they do want to, I think, send him a message. And I think he's going to get that message, and they're going to, I like them against Ole Miss today. I think it's a close game. I am also very high on Ole Miss as well coming to the season. I think I had them as like a top 14 or 12 team. But I like this Alabama team to bounce back. But if they don't, if they lose to Ole Miss, it's gonna be bad. It's gonna be a problem. That they could get south pretty quick on Nick Saban's. If they lose to Ole Miss, I think Nick Saban's not coming back after the year.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because we've heard other big shows out there talk about how Nick Saban's attitude has kind of changed just a little bit. He hasn't been as intense. He seems to be taking it all in. That's just, narrative, but this is an Alabama team that seems to be not firing on all cylinders as it has in previous seasons. Nick, what do the numbers say about Alabama's performance this year? Has their, destruction been overstated? Is this still a top team? What do the numbers say?
Well, they say different things, which I think is kind of interesting. I've been doing our CFP Winning Edge team profiles for, I think this is our sixth year. And this is the lowest by far that Alabama's ever been ranked in our power rankings. They're currently 14th overall. In team performance numbers, where we throw a bunch of advanced stats into the mix and see how they all shake out. Alabama right now is playing like a top 25 team, which sounds weird to say, that they're 24th in an overall team performance. They are barely in the top 40 offensively, and even that seems potentially a little bit high. They rank 64th in offensive passing team performance. A lot of the individual stats that we look at most closely, they are outside the top 40, in some cases outside the top 50 or 60. They are currently 44th in points per drive. That's against FBS opponents with garbage time filtered out. They are 47th in yards per pass attempt. They are 68th in success rate and 62nd in predicted points added per play. So those are just numbers that we don't associate with Alabama offensively, at least in this current era. And the defense has been better, but they've been playing more like a top 25 defense and not a top 10 or 5 defense like we've seen just about every year. So the talent numbers from a raw standpoint are still as good as they have always been. In terms of like the average recruiting rating for Alabama roster wise, they're still either at or very close to the top in just about every position for the roster as a whole. But we calculate things a little bit differently. We layer in experience, we layer in career production, and that impacts our what we call our roster strength numbers. And Alabama right now ranks 11th, and that's lower than we've ever seen. I don't think they've ever been outside of the top 4 in the last 5 or 6 years that we've done this. So we're in somewhat uncharted territory, and it's hard for me to wrap my head around, because it's, just used to seeing Alabama as number 1 or maybe, 2 or 3 in just about every category: overall power rankings, team performance numbers, roster strength numbers. And right now, that is not what the numbers are telling me. And what we've seen on the field, they haven't looked like that either. So I tend to, I think, agree with Mox that a bounce back seems to be coming. But at least right now, the evidence, that I look at most closely doesn't necessarily back that up. That's a little bit more of a hunch and relying on what has happened in the past and not necessarily what the numbers are showing me as far as where the talent level is and how this team's playing on the field.
JJ, what's your take on, is this the end for Alabama? Do they bounce back today against Ole Miss, or are we going to look back in a few months and say, oh, Alabama's playing against like Ohio in the Bahamas Bowl? What's your take here?
I said in week 0 that this was the worst Bama team in a while, and I'm pretty positive of that still. But like, I have so much to say about Bama, and I've got a couple of conspiracy theories too. Like, I think Tommy Rees had a big say in whether or not Jalen Milroe started or not, and put in Tyler Buckner. I don't know where they thought that was a good idea, and I don't know, this Bama team. Like, they're playing to what I expected. Like, I mean, the USF was like, that was just like a fluky game, but like, I didn't think we were gonna beat Texas. Of course, I bet on Bama because I'm rooting for Bama. But like, Milroe's played to my expectation, and also like the O-line has been awful. So I'm not like surprised how bad Bama's doing, but I do think they'll come back, and I think Milroe will cook, to be honest, against Ole Miss.
Well, we'll see. I mean, Lane Kiffin is one that's going to give us some fireworks, and let's see what Jackson Dart has today for Alabama. Let's see what Quinshon Judkins has today. Is Trey Harris? Is he back? Is Trey Harris back from injury?
He was practicing earlier this week. I tried to do a search before we got started and didn't see anything official, but definitely keep an eye out.
When I am commissioner of college football, we will have injury reports. They will come out on probably Thursday or Wednesday. We will have probable, doubtful designations, and we will have all the updated injury analysis that we need, because that is one of the hardest things to do, is track injury information in college football. Nick, give us the storyline again on just a loaded week 4 lineup. What's the storyline or storylines that you're tracking here this week?
Well, one thing I just tracked, Antonio Williams for Clemson is out this morning, so that's definitely going to be an impact today against Florida State. But on a broader scale, I have been intrigued by the lack of dominance that we've seen, sort of from the top ranked teams. We mentioned that Ohio State is number 1 in the CFP Winning Edge team strength power rankings. Obviously, that is not where the pollsters have Ohio State. They're 6th, I believe, in the AP poll. We have not seen a dominant performance yet from Georgia. They are 42.5-point favorites today against UAB, and so far, I don't have a whole lot of confidence that Georgia's going to be able to put up 42 points against anybody for the most part. It's just they've been a little sleepy, been a little slow. Michigan, I think, is in that boat as well. And all of these teams have certainly had moments, but they've also really taken the foot off the gas pedal on occasion, and just have not looked like what most people say is a number 1, number 2 ranked team. Texas, we saw last week, got off to a really, really slow start against Wyoming, coming off that huge win against Alabama as the number 3 team in the polls. Florida State had, arguably the best win of the season. If it's not that Texas win over Alabama, it's Florida State's win over LSU. And then last week, they really, really struggled to put Boston College away. So the teams that are expected to be the teams to beat on the path to playoff spots, conference title, national title picture, really for the most part, maybe with the exception of USC, but they're not quite getting the respect that the others have, you could say. We have not yet seen the dominant team that we have seen each of the last 4 or 5 years, because 2019 LSU was best team of all time, right? 2020, Alabama, best team of all time. 2021, Georgia, best defense of all time. And we got sort of a string where maybe we got a little spoiled, but we were dealing with just incredible, dominant, elite performances, either with a particular unit or a team from one season to the next. And this year, it seems very, very different. There are, we could get to the final week of the regular season, and I could envision, 15 teams on the list here that could potentially play their way into or out of that playoff discussion by the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's a season where I think that there's tension around college football because you really never know what's going to happen on a week-to-week basis. It seems like this is the type of year where your national championship champion is most definitely going to have one loss. Your national champion is going to have one loss, and we might have a team in the playoffs with 2 losses. I can see that happening. Mox, I mean, there's a lot of parity in college football this year, and it feels we knew that the 2023 draft class was taking a lot of guys with a lot of experience, a lot of established names, and we knew that 2023 was going to be a year where we got a lot of new blood and wouldn't know exactly what to expect.
Yeah, you're seeing it play out. I think, like we've talked about, Washington has been the most dominant team in the country. But, I mean, I think we were talking about them as Pac-12 underdogs in the summer, but not like national title contenders. And I still don't think they're there. I don't think their defense can hold up on a
By the way, I just want to plug Nicholas Ian Allen's returning production metrics, because that was one of the reasons why it was so easy to make a call for Washington, is because I believe, if I remember correctly, and Nick, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think they were 4th in the country in returning production, and like all the skill positions back. They did lose their running back, but they returned. It's a veteran team. It's a straight up veteran team in college football where there's a lot of guys who might be upperclassmen, but might be starting for the first time. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I mean, you don't realize how important some players are to the team that are not viewed as big impact players. So losing a player like Stetson Bennett and his experience and replacing it with Carson Beck has not been like a 1-for-1 transition. It's gone somewhat poorly for Georgia. And you don't view Stetson Bennett as like a big difference maker on aggregate, but it matters. And so, yeah, you're seeing a lot of issues. Like, is USC's defense fixed? Probably not. So you're having a lot of questions about some of these things. And so I agree. I mean, if you ask me right now who I think would win the national championship, it would be Georgia. If you ask me who would be in the top 3, I'm not really that sure. There's a lot of parity this year, which I think is good for the sport. But I don't know. These teams do not look... I think you're going to see a lot of upsets in conference play.
I agree. JJ, it's a loaded week 4. We've got ranked matchups all over the place. A lot of games that are going to have ripple effects throughout the season. What storylines are you looking for or tracking here this week 4?
First, really, you got to talk about Colorado and Deion. I think that's probably the biggest storyline of all of sports almost. And I think this is TCU was a big game for them, but Oregon and this upcoming stretch of USC, and then they got just a bunch of ranked games going on. And I think this is a pretty good, this will be a good indicator of where they're at. And then I also want to give a shout out to Shiloh because he gets no love. It's actually insane that his second son, or I think his third son, gets no love, and he'll go on to podcasts saying yeah, he's last in the rankings. And then even after the game, he had a pick 6, and they were they were talking to him about Shiloh, and he quickly just turns it into Shadur. And I'm just that's crazy. But I love Deion. I love what he's doing at Colorado. And speaking of Shadur, I think the QB3 spot in the 2024 draft is wide open. Penix, Sanders, and Ewers. Even though I don't think Ewers is quarterback 3, but there's a lot of talks for it. Like he got this crazy hype from the Bama game, which I don't even think he played that well, but it's a whole different story. I think he was playing 7-on-7 with 0 pass rush, but that's a different story. But I think that the QB3 is wide open, and I think there could be 4 quarterbacks in the first round, maybe 3. I haven't looked at like all the teams with like availability or like vacancies in spots, but I think there are talents there, like Joe Milton. Like there's a bunch of quarterbacks this year that can step up into that day one draft capital.
I think Michael Penix Jr. is the only one with a legitimate shot to be a back of the first round quarterback, but I kind of think that there are only going to be 2. Back to Oregon, Mox, different, brash, eccentric, loud. All of that stuff works when you are winning, but Colorado has 2 matchups here with Oregon today, and then USC next week, where the party might stop. But the party might stop after these 2 weeks. I don't know what I'm trying to ask here or throw out to the table, but like, is there a way that they can keep the momentum going today, even with a loss, where we still got Big Noon and College Game Day on campus at the same time, and that the country is still watching them? Or if they get beat 50-17 today, do you see it all falling apart, and now the narrative is about the dysfunction in Colorado? Because I can see, listen, the media builds you up to tear you down, and I feel like we are on the precipice of that happening in Colorado.
I think we are. I think there's a chance that they get beat by like 30 plus today. Have you noticed that Deion's a little bit quieter this week than he was last week? Than he was against TCU? I have. That's on purpose. I'm not surprised, because he knows the position that they're in, and the position that they're in is not an envious one. Someone who's talked the talk for 3 weeks and now is 3 touchdown plus underdog at Oregon, with the entire country tuning into that game to see your team probably get beat pretty good. That's not an enviable position to be in, but it is one that Deion has created for himself. Prime has been, how do I want to phrase this?
He's been the face of this team. He's brought all comers.
He's done his job.
He's the spectacle of college football, and he has done his job. I saw a tweet yesterday about how the marketing that they've really gotten from hiring Coach Prime is worth about $90 million. That's just through week, if you want to count week 0, week 5 weeks of the season. Nick, let me ask you about the objective metrics on Colorado. Colorado has brought in a lot of casual college football fans, and of course they're 3-0. We look at the record, we say they're ranked in the top 20 in college football. We could think that, hey, Colorado is here to stay as a player in college football, and maybe they are after this season. But what do your numbers say about the team overall? Is this a mirage? Is this an actual good team here in the Pac-12 that's just going to be overmatched the next couple of weeks? What do your numbers say about Colorado?
I don't think that it's a mirage. I think that Colorado has legitimately taken a huge step forward on the field the first 3 weeks, and they took a giant step forward as far as rebuilding the roster. I mean, before Deion Sanders took the job, the roster strength numbers, Colorado was in the triple digits nationally, one of the worst rosters, certainly in the Power 5 and on the low end nationally. And now they're, top 50. So not quite a top 25 level team like they are in the polls, or in some ways, they've played up to that level. But yeah, my numbers specifically on the field, they're a little lower than maybe you might expect. Colorado currently ranks 68th in overall team performance. There are some really good offensive numbers, or at least top 25 level offensive numbers. They're 32nd in passing team performance, so they're not quite as efficient maybe as the raw numbers might suggest. They really do struggle running the football. They're 107th in rushing team performance on the offensive side of the ball. But the biggest issue potentially that if they're going to be exposed or whatever your term of choice is this week against Oregon, it's on the defensive side of the ball, because they rank 102nd in defensive team performance overall, 103rd against the pass, and 108th against the run. Oregon is top 10 in all offensive categories. They're 8th overall in team performance offensively, number 8 passing, number 2 rushing. And so there's definitely a scenario where Colorado just can't stop Oregon today, and things just get out of hand. I do think that Colorado will have some success offensively. Oregon is certainly a tougher test defensively than Colorado has faced this season. But they are susceptible, but they are mostly, at least so far this year, susceptible against the run. They're 79th in defensive team performance against the run, top 20 against the pass. So it is sort of a strength versus strength. But I do think Colorado is going to be able to move the football. But at least as far as what the numbers are showing me right now, there's little evidence to suggest that Colorado is going to consistently be able to keep that Oregon offense in check.
We're going to see this afternoon. Dave adds in the chat, he says he thinks after today's game that next week's USC-Colorado line is going to bump up to USC by 21. So we'll pay attention to that. When we come back, we're going to get into our own start and sit decisions and get through the rankings again, our projections for the week. And yeah, that's when we come back. This is the Tailgate on the Better Sports Network.
Oh boy, we got a big one. We got a big card here.
Baby, let's go.
We got a super rookie.
Ooh.
Do you guys want to guess who the big card super rookie is? Because
I'm going to guess somebody from the Dallas Cowboys, but I don't recall who were rookies in those particular years. So I'm going to guess Michael Irvin.
Adam?
Jared kind of convinced me to go Troy Aikman there.
I'm going to read the description. In this player's NFL debut, September 10th, 1989, he produced an electrifying 68-yard punt return for a touchdown.
Sanders.
He became the first athlete in the 20th century to hit a home run, September 5th, 1989, for the Yankees at Seattle, and score a touchdown in the same week.
That needs a sleeve. That one needs a sleeve.
Top
100%.
super rookie, neon, prime time, Deion Sanders.
I wasn't that far off. He played for the Cowboys.
I was going to say Deion, and then when you said the early 90s Cowboys, I'm like, Aikman would be a good guess. So I go with your gut is the lesson there.
And there it is, the white and red Falcon jerseys that you said Deion came in with before they changed to black.
That was because the starting lineup for Deion his rookie year has got the red helmet with the white jersey.
Now look at that mean, are you kidding me with that hair?
I mean, you got to have a headband with those curls. You got to.
That is sick. And this is a favorite card. Do we have any value on this card? We have to, right?
Let me see.
Give me a value here.
Let's see here on eBay. PSA 10 Gem Mint Deion Sanders, $149.99. And then a 9.5 is $6. So that guy might be a little bit. Then there's a much more reasonably listed one at $31 for a PSA 10. So it's got some value to it. Yeah, you might want to protect that one.
It's in excellent condition. I guess we have to worry about, is it centered?
Yes, that would be the next thing.
All right, well, we'll go through the process there. Maybe I'll just frame that one as a great moment in this show's history.
We're back on the Tailgate. Chris Moxley, JJ, Nicholas Ian Allen, and I'm Felix Sharp. We're getting you ready for a loaded Week 4 slate here in college football. It's going to be a great day. It's going to be a great day. I like to kind of get some exercise in when I'm watching the games. I'm not doing that today. my eyes are just going to be glued on the multiple television screens that I'm going to be having up today. I want to bring up our rankings again, our quarterback rankings, so we can get folks ready here for the week 4 slate and get their starts set in their lineups. Caleb Williams, USC, taking on Arizona State. Jaden Delora, Arizona, taking on Stanford. Bo Nix, Oregon, gets that big Colorado matchup. Let's see if Colorado can keep it close. Let's see if Joe Milton can bounce back. Tennessee gets UT San Antonio, UTSA. DeQuan Finn. Toledo takes on Western Michigan in some action. Dylan Gabriel. Oklahoma against Cincinnati. I might have a start sit that involves this game. Michael Pratt, Tulane's Gamer, gets Nichols. Michael Penix Jr. Washington has been dominating this year. They get Cal. Jordan Travis in one of the more anticipated matchups on this week's slate. Florida State gets Clemson. Grant Wilson, bringing that spread down there to Old Dominion. Texas A&M gets, Old Dominion gets Texas A&M Commerce. Miami is back with Tyler Van Dyke. Miami gets Temple. Jalen Daniels, LSU, gets Arkansas. TJ Finley there at Texas State gets Nevada. And Cam Ward, Washington State, has another big matchup that we have not talked about today. Oregon State in that Pac-12 matchup. Mox, any particular quarterback that you like on this week that you're starting, whether it be in the top 14 or otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel good about rolling Michael Pratt out this week. He's going to play. I don't think Nicholls State is a particularly good FCS team, and I think he's going to want to show out a little bit, put up some points. So I really like rolling out Michael Pratt. He's been out 2 weeks. He's healthy. They would not play him against Nicholls State because they would not need to unless he was healthy. So I feel good about his health then. So that means I'm also probably playing Jaquan Jackson, who we have ranked highly at receiver as well.
Nick, any particular quarterback here in week 4 that you are wrapping your arms around?
I'm a little nervous, honestly, about Pratt, just because it is Nichols. Maybe they go out, get him a little bit of time, but then just sort of say, all right, you're back, you're healthy. Let's have you rest up a little bit again. So that one makes me a little bit nervous.
Would you still play Jaquan Jackson though?
So my numbers are lower than these on Jackson, but I think that might be my fault. So I feel more confident about Jackson than I do about Pratt, because I think they'll just be very careful with Pratt.
Kai Horton has not been that bad behind filling in for Pratt. So yeah.
As far as guys I like, I mean, I can't argue with most of them. My numbers are a little bit lower on Delora, but I do think obviously Stanford is a good matchup. So I'm not in any position to say that my numbers have a better read on that. I think he's definitely in line for a big game, especially if we do see Stanford bounce back a little bit, so that it won't be maybe a blowout situation where he has an early night. I think there's certainly an opportunity for Arizona to have to put up a lot of points in that game. But yeah, I mean, nothing really jumps out. I think I'm a little higher on Wake Forest this week than our projections are. Mitch Griffiths is 6th currently in my projections for this week. So that one catches my eye a little bit.
I want to highlight Washington State quarterback Cam Ward here. Cam Ward came from Incarnate Ward, transferred to Washington State with his head coach, who became his offensive coordinator at Washington State, Eric Morris. We expected a big things from Cam Ward last season. We saw his talent. He won the freshman awards there at Incarnate Ward. Washington State, he played relatively well. 23 interceptions, 23 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. But one thing, Chris Moxley, you pointed out time and time again last season was how inaccurate Cam Ward had been throwing the ball downfield. That offense under Eric Morris had really been a horizontal offense. Well, you look at how they performed this season. Cam Ward's completion percentage is up 6 points, which is, a lot. His yard per attempt average is up almost 3 yards from 6.5 to 9.1. That's a big jump. 9 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Cam Ward, we knew that he had kind of the arm talent and the scramble ability. I have not watched him to see if this yards per attempt average is actually a result of him throwing the ball downfield or if it's, a better wide receiver core making plays after the catch. But from a box score standpoint, Mox, Cam Ward is playing excellent football, and they get Oregon State today in a game where both starting quarterbacks are kind of rehabbing their images around the country.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he's been better than he was last year. And I think that's saying something because I didn't think he was particularly good last year. Adjusting from being an FCS team to going to a Power 5 conference also isn't easy. I did not like Eric Morris as an offensive coordinator. He is now the coach at North Texas. North Texas is struggling a little bit in a couple different ways. I thought him taking that job was actually an upgrade because they brought in Ben Arbuckle, who has done a really nice job stretching the field a bit more. Cam Ward is a good mover in the pocket. He can move and he can throw off platform. But I've watched him Washington State this year. He's still struggling with that deep ball. The accuracy is just not there. But it's better, which leads me to believe that he can still improve on that. I don't know what to project for Cam Ward long term, but I do think you have to be pretty excited with him if you're Washington State. And I don't have them winning this week, but I do think it's going to be a really competitive game.
Just a fun player to watch overall. Nicholas Ian Allen, let's get to starts and sits, our own starts and sits for the week in week 4. Now we'll start with you. Give us your start and sit of the week.
So I go through all my teams and try to mention the decisions that I put the most time into or struggled with the most. And there were a couple of running backs that I think were worth mentioning. It was fairly easy for me to decide to start Harrison Whaley. That might be too obvious. He is back and healthy and looked like it last week against Texas, went for over 100 yards. So I feel very, very good about him. Rodney Hammond, the running back at Pitt. There have been some quotes this week, hey, we need to lean on Rodney Hammond more. He's off to a really, really slow start this season. So perhaps there's some reason to expect that he'll get a boost this week. But a name that I found myself putting in the lineup more often than not that surprised me a little bit. And I slotted him in ahead of some of my favorites that have been a little slower this week. But Georgia Tech true freshman wide receiver Eric Singleton is off to a really, really strong start this season. That Georgia Tech offense is a lot better than I expected personally. Haynes King has been productive at the quarterback position so far this year, and I'm a sucker for pure speed, and Singleton is really, really fast. But I've been impressed that he's more than just a speed guy. So he seems like the real deal to me. He seems like the top target, top option for Haynes King moving forward in that Georgia Tech receiving core. And the matchup against Wake Forest is not a bad one. So, pardon me. So I'm starting Eric Singleton in quite a few places this week.
And I've not laid my eyes on Singleton. I know that Georgia Tech is playing above expectations coming into the season. So that's a team that I need to dive into, which is one of the reasons why I love college football is there's an endless amount of discovery to be had. But that's why I have Nicholas Ian Allen to point guys out to me. Did you give us your sits already for the week? Give us your if you haven't already. Did you give us your sits?
So this week I'm sitting Jackson Dart. He has also been off to a really, really strong start. Last week had to do a lot more in the run game than maybe we expected with Quinshon Judkins limited. And, the passing numbers have been, I think, better than expected. But Trey Harris, even though it sounds like maybe he's trending towards playing, and Caden Prescorn, the tight end who he's been without, it sounds like maybe is trending towards playing. I just think that this Alabama matchup defensively is not necessarily the right spot. So if I've got a quarterback that I feel a little bit better about, as good as Dart has been so far this year, I'm looking for other options when possible.
Jackson Dart is probably having one of the best starts to his season since he starting as a freshman. If he beats Alabama today, his stock takes a really big jump. Chris Moxley, who are your starts and sits for this week 4?
I actually went to enter them in our show sheet, and Nick already had Harrison Whaley, and I was like, okay, well, that was mine. So, if you want a hot take, this market does not exist for college, unfortunately, but I bet Harrison Whaley leads the country in rushing yards today. That App State defense is terrible against the rush. So I wholeheartedly concur on the Whaley point. I'm actually starting Jordan James against Colorado. I expect Oregon to be up big. I don't like this Colorado front seven. I actually think TCU would have won the game if they ran the ball more. They chose not to, and I think that's why they lost. I think Jordan James could have a really nice day for you today. And so if you have him and you're looking for a deep running back, I feel pretty good about starting him. I'm sitting most of the players in wind affected games. So I know that's like a pretty wide swath of players. So Javon Harvey at Old Dominion, I don't want to start him. Old Dominion's I believe they're in Norfolk, and that's kind of the track shifted a little bit upwards, and so it's going to get more head-on hit. I think it made landfall at Emerald Isle. So I am worried Dominion passing offense today. I'm trying to look elsewhere for Tyler Van Dyke if I can. I think you can start him because I think the short and intermediate stuff's going to be there. So like I'm also okay with Xavier Restrepo, but like I'm not starting Jacoby George after his big week. Like any downfield options in that game are off. So I wouldn't be starting anybody on the Temple side either. And I'm not starting anybody for ECU's passing game. Not that ECU has a passing game, but like I'm not tempted to either. So just all the wind games are going to be pretty heavily affected by wind, like 20 plus miles per hour. Like I'm looking out my window right now. It's pouring rain. Wind's probably going 25 plus. And Greenville, where ECU plays, is even closer to the path of the storm. So it's going to be worse there. And I think they're going to be the back end of the Ophelia band.
All right, Chris, I'm going to need you to stand up and do like the wind to the east and point and all that stuff, our weatherman. Chris, let me ask you about Jordan James and the timeshare there with Bucky Irving. Has Bucky Irving, after having a really productive season last year, has he just been relegated to more of a third down passing downs back role where Jordan James is handling the first and second? Jordan James, by the way, was one of my favorite freshman running backs of the second and third tier guys. Has he just Jordan James just elevated himself where you got to give him the ball on early downs there?
The problem is that Oregon's been in 2 huge blowouts. Like they won by 73 against Portland State and then went 45 against Hawaii. So I don't think we've seen the opportunity for Bucky Irving to be in competitive game scripts repeatedly. I'm not sure we're going to see that either this week. I think he's going to be more involved than he was against those 2 opponents, but we just haven't had the opportunity. So I'm not ready to determine what this timeshare looks like quite yet. But I do think Jordan James has made the case that he needs to be involved, at least like as a 1B back in this offense. He looks really good. And I know they've been weak opponents, but you still got to put up stats. Something that Donovan Edwards isn't doing, for example, at Michigan, who's had 3 straight cupcakes. It's like when you do it, it's awesome.
Yeah, I've got Jordan James in a few places. I'm glad that he's having the productive second year that he's having. JJ, give us your starts and sits here for the week.
I got a couple running backs with my starting, and in a couple of my leagues, I got LaDamian Webb. He went off last week for 18, 151, and 2 touchdowns against Oklahoma State. And the week before that, he went 7 for 81, 2 touchdowns again. So I think he should play well this week. And then I also have Rodell. I talked a little bit about Rodell earlier. He's out touching Jace. it was 17-13 in carries, and I think he's just better than Jace McClellan. I've always thought that, and I'm kind of off of Jace from here on out. I just think he tore his ACL 2 years ago, and I think that he lost a lot of mobility. And I remember him at Texas Alito. It's a school up North Texas, like Dallas area. They're a powerhouse, and I thought he was going to be good at Bama, but I think he's just lost a step since then. I think Jam Miller will even start to get more of a workload too. And then my sit for the week is Jermaine Burton for Bama. That I don't know if you have if you're in a deeper league with 3 flexes or so, I would not be confident in starting him at all because he had 1 catch versus USF. I think Bond is emerging this. He's starting to emerge this year, and I think Bond's better in general. And I also think they're going to be a little bit more run heavy this week, just because to take some pressure off of Milrow. So I think they'll be running the ball a little bit more.
Speaking of Isaiah Bond, I want to point out the fact that in Campus2Canton leagues, you have some players that you can start every single week, and they're going to get fantasy points for you. Other guys are guys that you just need to hold on to until they get their NFL draft capital. I think Isaiah Bond is one of those guys that you can't necessarily start, but if he got day 2 NFL draft capital based on his speed and ability, I would not be shocked about that. He's a guy who is playing well when he's getting opportunity, but given the fact that they took a step back in the quarterback position, given the fact that they've got a lot of guys in that room, he's not getting as much opportunity as he might elsewhere. That doesn't mean that he's not going to get the draft capital. So I wanted to point that out. The guys that I'm starting, there have been 2 Xaviers who have kind of had great starts to the season, one at South Carolina and one at Cincinnati. Xavier Henderson is the guy that I am starting today, the transfer from Florida, who, when he came in as a freshman 3 years ago, had a super athletic profile. And I thought with Anthony Richardson starting that this guy could eventually emerge into, a dominant number 1 wide receiver, 6'3", 200 pounds. Again, great vertical metrics, great 40-yard dash metrics, just a great overall athlete. But he's kind of had a Justin Shorter type arc to his career, except for when he transferred here to Cincinnati. He's playing excellent football with Emory Jones throwing him the football. He's got 2 games with over 140 yards receiving, including last week against Miami of Ohio, 12 receptions for 140 yards. Again, another player that Jim Nagy mentioned last week after his performance, having an excellent start to the season. He's been 2 good games, 1 game, just 1 catch for 10 yards. But I think that Emory Jones is continuing to have faith in him. So I'm going to start Xavier Henderson. And if Juice Wells is out, Mox, I guess I'm going to start both Xaviers then. I'll start Xavier Leggett too, who, in my opinion, out of the 2 Xaviers, Xavier Leggett has a better clear trajectory to the NFL given how he's playing, the way he's winning, I should say, getting more contested catches, showing that athleticism, whereas Xavier Henderson is doing more like hitch short stuff, not necessarily showing off his athleticism. So I like both Xaviers. I was only able to roster one because Xavier Leggett is getting more notoriety out there, so I wasn't able to roster him. But Xavier Henderson, I'm going to start him, and I'm going to sit Keon Coleman. I think that the Clemson game today, Keon Coleman, the wide receiver at Florida State, transfer from Michigan State, the guy who played both basketball and football there at Michigan State. No catches last week. He did have 1 carry for 2 yards. So he now in the last 2 weeks, he just has three catches total. Again, I think that this game is going to be a little bit of a defensive matchup. So I'm going to sit Keon Coleman, and I'm starting both Xaviers if you have them, but definitely Xavier Henderson there for Cincinnati. Mox, you got a bonus start for us before we get to the Devy segment?
I do. I want to shout out Zion Chris, the Louisiana Lafayette quarterback who goes against Buffalo. Buffalo just let Caden Salter score 50 fantasy points, and I think Zion Chris has a similar skill set. I think Zion Chris looked awesome last week against UAB in his limited time, 70% completion, 112 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns and 6 carries, including an 80-yard touchdown. I think Louisiana is going to take it to Buffalo, and I think he's going to be a big part of it. So if you need somebody or you picked him up this week, I can feel pretty confident rolling him out. And I am starting him in the 2 places that I have him.
Go ahead and like this video and subscribe for Chris's bonus start on the week. If you haven't already, do that either at Campus2Canton on YouTube or Better Sports on YouTube. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Chris, Austin is mentioning in the chat that you need to go outside and give us a weather report in person. Go ahead and give that to us, Chris. Let me tee up the Devy segment here. If you're tuning in for the first time, Devy is short for developmental. So I believe it's Corey Pereira who's going to be doing our Devy segment today, basically giving us a snapshot of players who we are projecting to the NFL and how we kind of what we're looking for from them this week. That's our Devy segment. So Tony, whenever you're ready, we'll go ahead and play that.
What is going on, Campus2Canton family? Corey Pereira here from the Campus2Canton Devy team, and week 4 is here, and in some ways, this feels like the first real week of competition across the NCAA. The cupcake matchups are behind us, and we've got 6 ranked matchups this weekend. That's the most ranked matchups in a weekend in almost 20 years. So get your popcorn ready, and let's watch some of our Devy favorites face some of the stiffest competition they're going to face all year. Let's go. Now, I want to start with one of the best matchups this weekend with Alabama going up against Ole Miss. And a lot of talk is going to be centered around the quarterbacks here. Yes, Alabama's going back to Jalen Milroe after that failed experiment last weekend. But I actually want to look to the other side here and talk about a quarterback playing for Ole Miss named Jackson Dart. Now, Dart was a bit of a Devy darling when he got a few starts at USC a couple of years ago. But after a year of play at Ole Miss, he saw his value take a pretty good dip. But I actually saw a lot of things that I liked. He had good size, big arm, good mobility, and he makes those big-time throws you want to see from NFL quarterbacks. The problem is, he's a bit of a gunslinger. He was just looking for that home run a lot of the time and forcing the ball in situations that he probably shouldn't have. So far this year, he's actually played fairly clean football. He's taking a lot of those shorter gains a lot more frequently, taking what the defense gives him. The problem is, he hasn't really faced tough competition yet to this point, and he's really not getting a lot of love from those draft nicks out there. But a strong showing against Alabama this weekend could really help put his name on the map. Sticking with the quarterback class here, we all know the big names in the quarterback 3 race. Quinn Ewers, J.J. McCarthy, if you're a Michael Penix guy, maybe even Shedeur Sanders with the way he's been playing. But do you guys remember the hype that was around Washington State quarterback Cameron Ward a couple years ago? This was a guy who lit up the record books in the FCS, was called a potential first-round pick by a couple scouts as he was looking to transfer up into the Power 5. He had a shaky first season with the Cougars, struggling to push the ball down the field and holding on to the ball a little bit too long sometimes, but he really showed some uncanny instincts in the pocket and some real natural ability as a thrower. Maybe we were a year too early, as early in the season it seems like Ward is settling in as we once thought he could. He's thrown the 5th most yards in the Power 5, he has 9 touchdowns to 0 interceptions, and he's starting to push the ball downfield a lot more than he was last year. Even if you look at last week's game, he had an 11.6 yard average depth of target. That's the highest number to date in his entire Power 5 career. When you watch this guy play, there's some shades of like a young Deshaun Watson there, but I honestly think just becoming a day 2 pick would be great for Ward and his journey to this point. Shifting over to the 2024 running back class, it's been a little bit of a shaky start for the top end of this group. My personal running back 4 coming into the season was Florida State running back Trey Benson after that phenomenal finish he had to last season. After all that hype he had all offseason, though, it's been a little bit of a shaky start to this season. He's managed to put together a 33 carry for 164 and 4 touchdown stat line, which looks great if it was over one game, but that's all he's given us over 3 weeks. He just really isn't getting that workload that we expected him to get coming into the season. We know he added some weight this offseason, and he's been getting hit behind the line a lot more frequently than he used to be. But Benson was able to get out of these situations last year, and he just hasn't been able to do that to this point. I'm going to give him a pass this early into the season, but he's going to have to turn it around quick to keep being in consideration as a top 5 running back in this class. On the flip side of this is a really underrated running back in this class, and one that's become a little bit of a favorite of the Back to Devy team, and that's Kansas running back Devin Neal, who started this year on fire. 40 carries for 303 yards and 5 touchdowns, and adding 7 catches for 72 yards and a touchdown through the air. He's been incredibly efficient. That efficiency keeps increasing year over year. He's got the size, he's got the athleticism, and he's got the receiving profile to look like one of the better running backs profiles on paper. The real problem here is the lack of attention he seems to be getting playing over at Kansas. I mean, you're going to be hard-pressed to find any draft nicks talking about him. He's barely mentioned in this year's group of running backs. I mean, he's going to have to continue to have a really strong season that demands attention. And hopefully Kansas, with another exciting prospect in quarterback Jalen Daniels, can be an exciting enough team to get in the national eye a little bit. This guy has a profile that warrants a day 2 selection. Now, last week, we took a look at a couple of freshman running backs that were really starting to make a name for themselves early in the season. This week, I kind of want to do the same thing, looking at a couple of true freshman wide receivers who are starting to do the same, starting with Vanderbilt wide receiver London Humphreys. Now, this kid's been getting a lot more playing time over the last couple of weeks, and he's managed to turn that into a 9-catch, 266-yard, and 3-touchdown stat line over the last 3 weeks. This kid is 6'3", 185 pounds, and has an athletic profile that consists of tremendous track times and a long jump state championship. He's really worked his way into being a deep threat early in the season, averaging 29 yards a catch, a 22-yard average depth of target, and almost 4 yards per route run. He's been the SEC's most productive wide receiver on 20-plus yard targets down the field so far this season. Another true freshman wide receiver that I really think needs to be on radars is Clemson wide receiver Tyler Brown, who kind of broke out last week with a 7-catch, 72-yard, and 2-touchdown performance. Some injuries to Clemson's wide receiver room is starting to open up some opportunities for some of these younger guys, and Brown really stepped up operating out of the slot and became a really nice weapon for Cade Klubnik. And this wasn't just a case of a blowout either. I mean, Tyler Brown's first touchdown came in the second quarter, and it seems like Clemson may have found something with this Antonio Williams, Tyler Brown type of wide receiver archetype rather than the towering wide receivers they seem to prefer over the past few years. This wide receiver core is begging for another wide receiver to step up, and as much as I would have liked it to be Adam Randall, Brown seems to be making a case for more playing time. That's going to wrap it up for this week's Devy Sesh, guys. Make sure you guys are checking out the Back to Devy podcast every Wednesday morning, the #1 Devy podcast on the Campus2Canton podcast feed. Don't let anybody else tell you different, and make sure you guys are keeping it locked with Campus2Canton all season long.
Like Devon Levi started off in the friend zone, and now like he could possibly be wife material. So it is exceptionally hard to trust a rookie goalie in the NHL. The kid is what? He's 21. Like, okay, and he is going to the Buffalo Sabres. But we've all agreed that the Buffalo Sabres are at least a somewhat better hockey team on paper. Again, it's hard to trust a rookie goalie. We've seen future Hall of Fame goalies like, Fleury in his first year struggle, right? Carey Price in his first year struggle. It is tough for goalies to come in and have success. That being said, nobody outside of maybe a Buffalo sports fan can tell me who the 2 goalies on their roster are, because I didn't know until this morning, until I was reminded that it was Eric Comrie and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. And I was like, okay, well, he has the crease to himself. So all he can do is lose it. That's all he can do. Buffalo is going to be a fun team to watch, which means maybe Devon Levi ends up in what I call the Martin Jones syndrome, which is a goals against average is pretty up there. Save percentage is not very good, but he's going to finish with 35 wins because he's just going to play a lot. And it's going to be that back and forth hockey. The Atlantic Division is not very good, right? There are some teams that are going to regress. So there's opportunities here for Buffalo to do well. And I think his over-under on wins is set at 24.5. So again, there's a lot of things that I may not trust about him, but as a 13th goalie off the board, and I think that is a reach at 13. I think a lot of people have him farther back than that. So he may be 13 on NHL.com's list, but you may end up and show up in your Yahoo or your ESPN draft and they haven't ranked probably outside of the top 20. So I would have no issue as a second goalie going with Levi, because like, who's taking his spot? Nobody. And volume at one point, if you're in a league that doesn't penalize you for losses, if you're in a league that rewards saves and save bonuses like, for daily, DraftKings does, he has all that working for him. So if it doesn't work out, all right, fine. Then you can go and pick up whoever is there. But it is his net to lose. I understand the risk. I will definitely take, because that's how you win championships, right? You got to take risks to win them. If you're safe, you're going to finish, eliminated in the first round and you had a good time. Or you can try to win the championship on draft day.
Felix Sharp, Nicholas Ian Allen, JJ Parker, Chris Moxley joining you here. It is the Tailgate on the Better Sports Network. We're helping you get set up with your lineups. We're helping you with betting. We're helping you with player props. But let's go ahead and bring up those running back rankings for week 4 so we can help people get started with their lineups. You better set your lineups. You got about 26 minutes until they lock. We got Devin Neal, Kansas, taking on BYU. Marcus Carroll, Georgia State, taking on Coastal Carolina. Blake Corum, Michigan, has Rutgers today. Jawar Jordan, Louisville, takes on Boston College. Trevor Etienne, Florida, gets Charlotte today. Roman Hemby, Maryland, gets Michigan State. Marshawn Lloyd, USC, gets Arizona State. Ray Davis, the Kentucky Wildcats, get Vanderbilt. Michael Wiley at Arizona gets Stanford. Jordan Waters at Duke gets Connecticut today. Jordan James, who Chris Moxley likes today, Oregon gets Colorado. Of course, LaQuint Allen, Syracuse, gets Army. Omarion Hampton, the big boy from North Carolina, gets Pittsburgh. Travion Henderson, Ohio State, gets Notre Dame in one of the marquee matchups here on the week. Let's go to the tight end position. Tight ends always a crap shoot. Jack Westover, Washington, gets California. Jatavian JT Sanders, Texas, gets Baylor. Dallin Holker had a great week last week against Colorado. Colorado State gets Middle Tennessee today. Amari Niblack, Alabama, gets Ole Miss. Again, another marquee matchup. Case Stover, Ohio State, gets Notre Dame. Tanner Koisel, Ball State, gets Georgia Southern. Thomas Fedone, he's healthy. I did not realize that he was healthy, and he's back. Former #1 tight end in his class. Nebraska gets Louisiana Tech. Jaheim Bell, who can play a number of positions, including running back. Florida State gets Clemson. Ben Sinnott, Kansas State, gets UCF. Holton Stays, who's kind of stepping into the shoes for Michael Mayer today. He gets Ohio State. Benjamin Urasek, after that week 1 performance against Hawaii. Let's see if he can put up some big numbers against Arizona today. Brock Bowers, Georgia, gets UAB. Corey Dyches, a tight end in name alone. Shout out to Eric Froton there at NBC. Maryland gets Michigan State today. And then Isaac Rex gets Kansas today. All right, guys. Let's go here to Prize Picks. You can use promo code C2C for a deposit match of up to 100%. Chris, can we start with you with your player prop that you're playing today?
Yeah. Last week was a fun one because when you get kind of weird and it hits, it's always a good time. So I'm going to get weird again. Last week we were right on the negative rush yards for Will Rogers, who got beat up by that LSU front. Going back to that well. This time we're going Shedeur Sanders, who I don't think is a particularly mobile quarterback. I think he stays in the pocket for too long. A lot of the pressures are self-generated. I think that they could have a problem against this Oregon front because I don't think this offensive line is all that good. And they've had a lot of pressure against teams that I don't think traditionally bring pressure. This number is at -1.5. I think he could end with like -20 today. So I love this number. I actually think it should be a lot lower than it is, but I'm not complaining. I'll take it. The other one that I really like is Reggie Love.
By the way, the boss man, Matt Deutsch, loves the negative rushing yards props.
He does.
Shout out to the boss.
He does. And there's some value there because I don't think people realize. And the Shedeur number is not quite low enough because I think people just want to back Colorado. The other one I like is Reggie Love, Illinois running back. They get FAU today. This over 58.5 rush yards is also a little bit short. FAU is just not a good team right now. They struggled against this Ohio team 2 weeks ago. I think Illinois. This is a get spot for Illinois. I don't think they're passing the ball all over the yard with Luke Altmaier right now, who is a turnover machine. I think Reggie Love could have a 70 to 80 yard day, and I think you're getting him at 58.5. That's a nice number. I have a couple others I like, but those are probably my 2 favorites. Also like Evan Stewart over 16.5 fantasy points. He's going to be healthy, it sounds like, and he's playing.
Yeah, I was going to ask because Evan Stewart, he's got a red flag next to his name on Fantrax, so I want to make sure that he's healthy.
And Noah Thomas is out, so could help Stewart.
Evan Stewart gets like 20 targets a game, so 16.5, 17.5 fantasy points is a nice line. He's dressed and warming up, so I think he'll play, and I think this is a good matchup for him against the Auburn secondary.
Noah Thomas out, Evan Stewart healthy. That means you start Evan Stewart. JJ, give us some player props that you like on the day.
I got 3 today. maybe more to come, but I got Cornelius Johnson over 51.5 receiving yards. He's 3 for 3 on the season, and I don't know, all these picks have been my wagon for the past like 3 weeks. I've just been rolling them out, and they've been hitting. So my next one is Roma Dunze. He's also 3 for 3 on the year with his over yards. He has 126 yards on average per game, and this week it's 105.5 yards. That's a lot of yards, but also Washington is just that good. And then my final one is Jalen Milroe, and he's actually 2 for 2 on his overs as well. He didn't play last week, so we won't count that. And he scored 22 versus Texas, which is like even surprising. He had those 2 picks. I think he'll play better I think he'll have his second best game. Middle Tennessee doesn't really count, but I think he'll have his best game this week. And I think that the rushing upside will also offer a little bit more on the fantasy side.
There we go. Nick, give us your player props that you're playing here in week 4.
So Caleb Williams over 300.5 passing yards, I think looks pretty good. My projections do trend a little low, so I pay closest attention to overs, and Williams I think is in a good spot against Arizona State. Jalen Daniels over 26.5 rushing yards. The Kansas quarterback looks pretty good according to my projections. I think I've mentioned Jamal Banks and his over on receiving yards every week. My projections still really like Banks, and it's been good more often than not. 63.5 seems very reasonable going over that. When I discussed this in the Campus2Canton Discord a couple of days ago, Jonathan Banks under rushing yards was I think at 86.5. That last I saw was now down to 80.5, so lost maybe a little bit of value there. But a late add that I think is worth mentioning. My projections are already fairly high on Tavion Robinson, the Kentucky wide receiver, but we got confirmation within the last hour that Vanderbilt's actually going to be without 2 starters in its secondary. So like Tavion Robinson, either the over 12 fantasy points or over 48.5 receiving yards, like both of those, in part because of some injuries in that Vanderbilt secondary today.
I'm actually going to go to Sleeper for my player props today. I don't think that a lot of folks know that you can go to Sleeper and you can play player props on your Sleeper app. How about Bo Nix over 316.5 passing yards today? Again, in that big game against Colorado at home for Bo Nix. No Travis Hunter. We know that Colorado is a team that passes the ball a lot because they can't really run the ball. I think in this game, this could be a longer game where Oregon gets a lot of possessions, because I think there are going to be times where Colorado simply can't move the ball. So we could see the ball in Bo Nix's hands quite a bit. They've got Tez Johnson. They've got Troy Franklin, both of whom can score at any given time. And then in Marquise Bucky Irving out of the backfield, over 316.5 passing yards for Bo Nix. That is the player prop that I like. Play it on Sleeper. Play it on Sleeper. I think that if we play a little bit more college football on Sleeper, maybe they'll get to actual college fantasy on the app. So you can play that one on Sleeper. All right, Nick, Chris, you guys are the betting gods. Let's go to your best picks.
Chris has definitely been carrying us. This 10-9 record for us this season includes 6 losses on my side. So do keep that in mind, but I am trying to get better at selection. And so if you caught my eye this week, I'm on SMU +7. I did a study a few years ago about teams that go on the road in sort of a short travel situation. SMU is in that spot this week with the crosstown rivalry against TCU. The favorites in that situation do pretty well historically, and my numbers also line up on SMU otherwise. Eastern Michigan plus 6.5 today on the road against Jacksonville State. I think there's definitely a potential that Eastern Michigan pulls that one out outright. Lost a little bit of value on this when we released it earlier in the week. Officially, UAB was 42.5 point underdog against Georgia. That's now down to 40.5, but all three of my projection models do still have UAB covering 40.5, but not quite as confident in that one. And then one that really has caught my eye, that's been tough for me to shake throughout the course of the week. I think that Missouri's in a little bit of a letdown spot against Memphis this week. That game is going to be in a neutral field in St. Louis. Mizzou, of course, had the big walk-off win, upset win over Kansas State last week. And this Memphis team, my numbers don't necessarily love, but do think that they're going to be able to keep it within a touchdown. So I've got Memphis plus 6.5, again on a neutral field against Mizzou today.
I like that SMU pick a lot. I've been waiting for it to get to 7 all week, and it finally hit this morning. So I am in agreement with you there. I had 4 when the show started, and one got bet down 8 points during the show. So I can't give you that one anymore. That was going to be Gardner-Webb, ECU. Again, I talked about the weather all day. Why are you opening up 59 on 2 rush-heavy teams that struggle offensively? And I don't know. But I'm sorry. That's not in play anymore. I wouldn't take it less than 53. It's basically 51 in most spots. But I'll give you some that are available still. Going to get a little weird this week on some of them because a lot of the values, I think, gone. Washington team total over 20.5 in the first half, minus 120 on DraftKings. I think is a pretty good number. I think Washington's going to score 3 touchdowns in the first half. I feel pretty confident in that. I think they're going to want to get out to a lead early. I don't think this Cal defense can stop them. And I asking 3 touchdowns out of Washington team in either half is not a bad bet. It's actually not a bad DraftKings has it minus 120. Elsewhere, it's like minus 170. So you're getting a huge discount there as well. USC first quarter spread, 7.5. I think they're going to crush this Arizona State team. And I think they could be up like 21-0 the first quarter as well. Arizona State didn't score a single point last week against Fresno State. I think Fresno State's kind of outperformed my expectations, but I don't think that their defense is better than USC's defense. So that kind of tells you where I'm at on this. So USC basically needs a touchdown and field goal to cover this number. I think they get there. I don't think Arizona State scores unless USC turns it over possibly, or they just decide they can't tackle. But this Arizona State team they're on quit watch as well. I've been doing really well in the FBS versus FCS games. I think we're 4-0 or 5-0 on this show in those picks. So I got another one. It was going to be the ECU one. I'm just mad that since it was released at 10, it's gone down. Give me Miami of Ohio to cover 40.5 against Delaware State this week. The Delaware State team total is 2.5 points. There are 263 Division I teams. I think Delaware State is probably ranked 255-ish. So of all of those teams, that's how bad I think Delaware State is. They got crushed by Army. They basically been crushed all year. I think they're a very bad team. I actually really like what I've seen from Miami of Ohio on both sides of the ball. I think the defense has been pretty good. And, they played really well against Cincinnati last week. So I like them to cover this 40.5. I'm not sure Delaware State scores any points. Vegas doesn't seem that they're just think that they're going to score more than 3. So I think 40.5. I would stop at 41 or 42. But, you don't have to. 40.5 is available at a couple different places right now. So, yeah, I just think that number is a little bit short.
All right, there it goes. We're short on time, so we need to get through our wide receiver rankings here and then go through our game picks. We're going to have Barnabas Lee come on to talk about some matchups that he's looking for in each of these games. But before we get to that, let's go through our wide receiver rankings here. Eric Brooks is getting the volume there for the aforementioned Fresno State. They got Kent State today. Rome Odunze. Washington's offense has been firing on all cylinders. Rome Odunze is the primary outside wide receiver. Washington gets Cal. Malik Neighbors, after going ballistic last week, LSU gets Arkansas today. Jaquan Jackson, Tulane gets Nicholls State. Jalen McMillan, we've got two Washington wide receivers here in the top 5. Washington again gets California. Teteroa McMillan, excellent catch in the double coverage in the seam last week. Arizona gets Stanford for the big-bodied wide receiver Teteroa McMillan and former volleyball player in high school. Gage Larvadan, my coach Chuck Martin coached Miami Redhawks, and Chris just mentioned betting this game. Miami gets Delaware State. Lawrence Keys, Tulane gets Nicholls State. Brian Thomas Jr. at LSU. LSU gets Arkansas. Troy Franklin, could he have a big touchdown, a long play today against Colorado with no Travis Hunter? Nick Anderson, Oklahoma gets Cincinnati. Xavier Weaver, with, again, another Travis Hunter affecting this entire ranking. With no Travis Hunter, he's clearly the number 1 wide receiver. Colorado gets Oregon. Drake Stoops. Oklahoma gets Cincinnati. And maybe an update here from the last time I looked at our projections here. Derwin Burgess gets Georgia Southern. So the rankings that I'm reading might be a little bit different than what you're seeing on the screen because these projections are being constantly updated. We got to throw out the name here since Chris mentioned what am I looking for? Noah Thomas being out. Evan Stewart today is a good play, a good start as well, even though he wasn't there for our projections. All right, let's bring Barnabas up here when we can. We got to get to these actual games. This is a great slate here, so we'll go through and make our picks. All of these lines came from DraftKings. We're going to pick against the spread. Florida State at Clemson. Clemson favored by 2 at home. I think I'm taking Florida State.
Florida State favored by 2.
Florida. Yeah, I had. Yeah. Did it switch or did I read it wrong? Because I yesterday had Clemson. You think I read it wrong? Okay. Well, Florida State favored by 2. I got Florida State winning. I think Florida State covers. I'm going to go back and look at this line now, Chris, as you're calling me out. Let's go, Chris. Who you got in this one?
Yeah, I got Florida State. I took a bad number early, and that was a mistake. But yeah, I like Florida State. I just don't like this Clemson offense very much, and Antonio Williams being out could potentially be an issue.
Let's go around the horn here, JJ.
Let me get Florida State as well. I've been said K. Klubnik is fraudulent, and I think everyone from Westlake is fraudulent, but it's a good story as well.
And it is Florida State by 2, so I stand corrected. All right, Nicholas Ian Allen, who you got in this one?
Well, maybe the CP winning edge projections threw you off a little bit because we've got Clemson favored, and my confidence level is not super high, especially with the news that Antonio Williams out. Walker Park, starting offensive lineman, is also going to be out. But do have Clemson winning this game outright on the road, or excuse me, at home. Florida State being on the road. We'll see. Not super high level of confidence though.
Barnabas Lee at PKJB Lee on Twitter. He is really paying attention to these games from an NFL draft perspective, so we bring him on to determine which player matchups we should be paying attention to. Barnabas, which matchups are you paying attention to in this big one today?
Yeah, the Seminole rushing attack has been super balanced this year. Rodney Hill's gotten a lot of carries. Toafili's seen some work. Jaheim Bell gets carries even. Keep in mind that Jordan Travis hurt his non-throwing shoulder last week, and so they might try to prevent him from getting hit this week. So I'm looking at Clemson's linebacker core and seeing how they face up against this rushing attack, including legacy Jeremiah Trotter. For a little older, we remember his dad, and Barrett Carter. So this is supposed to be a great linebacking core, and so we'll see how they match up against that rushing attack.
All right, let's go on here to Colorado at Oregon. I didn't misread this one. Oregon favored by 21. I think they cover in this one, so I am taking Oregon. Chris, who you got? and Chris has nobody because he's muted.
I got Oregon. I just think the Colorado offensive line is going to struggle a lot, and especially keeping Shedeur Sanders upright.
JJ. Uh-oh. He's putting on his shades. He messed up the pick because he muted himself. He's putting on his shades. I think he's about to take Colorado.
I got my boy Prime. This Oregon team shouldn't have even covered against Tech. Texas Tech. So I got 21 points is a lot, and I think Shedeur can score. That's for sure.
They can score. No Travis Hunter today. It might be a little bit harder. Nicholas Ian Allen, who do you have in this one?
My projection models, the three of them are split a little bit. The stats only model actually has Oregon covering, having the projected spread by closer to 24. But my primary model has Oregon favored by 20.3. So technically on Colorado to cover this week.
Barnabas, tell us which matchups we should be paying attention to here.
Yeah, we've already talked about Shedeur Sanders. His first game of the season was against TCU, who was supposed to have maybe one of the best defenses in the Big 12. But they're mostly secondary heavy, so he tore that defense apart. Let's see how he does against edge pressure. Oregon has two draftable edges here in Brandon Dorless and Jordan Birch. And Oregon loves their bigger 270-ish defensive ends that eventually lose weight during the draft process when they get drafted. So we'll see how it faces against that edge pressure.
Let's go here to Ole Miss at Alabama, 3:30. Alabama favored by 7. I'm going to take Ole Miss in this one. Chris Moxley, who do you got?
Roll Tide. This is get right week. Period.
Revenge week. JJ.
Let Milroe cook. I got Milroe all the way. I got Bama for sure.
Nick?
We discussed it very briefly earlier. This is one where my numbers and my eyes may not entirely line up. We've got Alabama favored by less than a single point in this one. So Ole Miss, a winnable game and a pretty big projected edge to cover.
Barnabas, which matchup should we...
Another one for the edges. Ole Miss has two draftable edges, Cedric Johnson, Jaden Ivey, so we'll see how he does with a slightly more mobile quarterback in Jalen Milroe. It can actually go the other way because we have a missing site notice on the milk cartons for Dallas Turner this year. So we'll see if how much pressure Jackson Dart is under as well.
I love this 3:30 time slot. We got UCLA at Utah. I love me some Dante Moore, but I think that Utah pulls this one out. Even if we don't have Cam Rising, Utah favored by 3. I think that they cover today. I got Utah. Chris, who you got?
I got UCLA. I think Dante Moore goes into Salt Lake and beats them.
JJ.
No Cam Rising. I got UCLA as well.
Nick?
Lost a little value after the Rising news broke, but we've had UCLA favored to win outright all week.
Barnabas?
Utah's super strong up the middle on the defense. Junior Tafuna at defensive line, Kariane Reed at linebacker, and Cole Bishop at safety. So we'll see how the UCLA rushing attack looks against those guys.
All right, let's speed through this one. Oregon State favored by 3 against Washington State today. I think I'm going to take Washington State in this one. Chris, who you got?
Give me Oregon State.
JJ.
Oregon State as well. I like DJU.
Nick?
Oregon State, but close.
Barnabas, which would
draft-wise a little bit slim pickings in this game. Joshua Gray at left tackle. He's probably going to switch inside in the league, but he's going against edge rusher Brennan Jackson, so that'll be interesting.
As fast as you possibly can, Chris Moxley, Ohio State 3.5 at Notre Dame. Who you got?
Ohio State.
JJ.
The Ohio State.
Nick.
Ohio State very, very close.
Go ahead.
This one's super easy for me. It's JT Tuimoloau versus Joe Alt. Everyone knows about them, so we'll see how it goes.
I think I'm going to take Notre Dame in this one. We'll be back next week in week 5. College football is going to be fun today. We hope you all enjoy it. We'll see you next week. Peace.